some life to this party.
The map is.
The map of the East.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird universe, which was a lot of fun to do. And how we came up with it was really just trying to sort of have fun and not take our ideas too seriously, but then take the work seriously. That was sort of our motto. So we were going to be doing a short film for a contest, and when we were figuring out what we would do, I lived on a boat at the time, and I had access to the ability to do visual effects just because I have experience working in post-production, and I've done visual effects on certain projects. The fight scenes were a lot of fun to do. We basically worked with the fight coordinators, Tyler Williams, Kevin Robinson, Ash Malone, and I would talk to them about what I wanted from the scenes. You know, they knew the characters, they knew what had to happen in the story, and then it was just a matter of letting them do their thing because they're so talented and they're the pros. And they would come up with a scene, and we would then talk about it and practice it and rehearse it. And if we needed to adapt anything to make it more practical for where we were shooting, we would. And then once that was all designed, then myself or Navin Ramaswaran or Jason Lever, depending on who was directing that day, would come in and basically figure out where the camera should go and all of that. So the hard part for me was when I had to direct myself. We did have two other directors that worked on the series, depending on which day we were shooting. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was Jason Lever, sometimes it was Navin Ramaswaran. So what we tried to do when we were designing the schedule was organize it where the biggest scenes that I had to do, if there was a lot of acting involved, a lot of lines, a lot of focus on my character, we would just make sure that one of the other guys was directing that day. It didn't always work out that way, but for the most part it did, and most of my focus as a director was shooting the scenes that involved the other characters. To create the characters, there were sort of two big points in the process that made everything turn out the way that it did. Obviously, first was when Aaron Sang, Jim Christopher, and myself were writing it. We knew we had to write characters. I mean, we're in a flooded universe with pirates and laser guns. Everything's heightened. It's very fantastical. And so we knew that we had to crank everything to 11. You're normally, when you're writing, trying to make characters that test each other's strengths and weaknesses and all of that stuff. And we just made sure that took it a little farther than we might normally have, because that heightened reality was a part of what we were going to be doing. Yeah, when you're doing a micro-budget thing, there's always, every filmmaker that you'll ever talk to is going to tell you stuff came at them that they weren't anticipating, that they had to, last second, rewrite everything and make it work. And this was no different. Especially when you're shooting on the water, there are so many more things that I had not thought of. The water's a moving thing. You can't just set up a shot and have it work, because the boats float and everything moves, and then there's the sun, and then there's people, miles in the background that are driving their boat along, and you've got to wait for them to pass. So there's stuff like that. Also on the boats, I think probably the biggest day that threw us threw a curveball at us was it was in season 1, episode 4. There was a sequence where two boats. There's the hero's boat and the bad guy's boat, and there's a chase sequence and then a fight sequence, and the boats get tied off together, and then there's a dialogue scene and yada yada yada. And we had scheduled to have 2 boats. Well, actually 3 boats. We had one boat that the camera was on, and then 2 boats that were picture boats that you'd see on screen. And but we found out on the day that we didn't actually have access to both boats for the entirety of the day, and we only had an overlap of both boats at the same time for something like an hour or 2, which completely changed how we were going to shoot it and what we were going to do. So Jason and I had to sort of throw out all the storyboards that we had planned. We'd meticulously planned it because we already had kind of known it was going to be a difficult day to begin with. But then we had to, from scratch be like, okay, well, if we've only got this boat for this time and this boat for this time, and the sun's going to be here, and then this is going to be there, and then we ended up having to do a lot of improvisation, and again, more rolling the dice and just figuring it out as we went along. So we definitely had conversations at the very early stages about what format we should make this show. We didn't know what it was going to be. And all that we had was a short film that we had done and a micro short film. It was like a 1-minute aftershave commercial with starring Pete Winning, and that was that. And we were sort of just figuring out what made the most sense. And then I became friends with Jason Lever, who ended up becoming a producer and co-director on the show. But he had a web series at the time called Out With That, and it was this huge hit. And he was just really encouraging and said, if you want to tell a longer story, but the format really works with these bite-size elements, why not do a digital series? And so that his encouragement, and then our realizing that it also just sort of made sense because it was a way that we could immediately get eyes on it, and it was a new form at the time. There were web series, of course, but it wasn't. It was a thing that I had to educate myself on as to what this format even was, and so that made the format exciting, and it allowed us to do our short form episodes that we could still release week by week. I think my biggest takeaway from making Pete Winning is whenever you can, just make sure to remember to work on things that you're having fun working with. It's a zany project. There are pirates and lasers and boats and mutants. So much of all of the things that I love, and I think so much of all of the things that a lot of the people loved who worked on it, that it made the process of making it very special. We formed friendships that, years later are still just as, if not more strong. And, we've got this family that we're gonna have for the rest of our lives because of this little futuristic pirate fairy tale. Are there plans to continue the series? Well, I think that a plan means that you have a specific set of things in line that just now need to be done. And if that's your definition of plan, there are currently no plans. If we're talking, is there a desire? And I don't think I speak for just myself either. I know I've had conversations recently too with a lot of the people that worked on it. Is there a desire to do more? Yeah, absolutely.